The ship floated in the darkness like a corpse in deep water. It was old. It was broken, and it should not have been there. Archivist Prime Keshen stood at the viewing window of his vessel and watched the strange craft drift through the void. His three eyes narrowed as he studied its shape. The design was primitive. The metal hull showed signs of damage from decades of cosmic radiation. The engines were dead. No lights glowed from within, but the ship was not empty. His scanners told him that much. Something inside was still alive. Not a living creature. Something else. A machine. A computer. A memory that refused to die. What species? Asked Velen, his second-in-command. Keshen checked his datapad. The archives of the Velthrani Collective contained information on over 4,000 civilizations. Every species they had ever encountered was catalogued, studied, and stored. Their cultures, their histories, their biology, their dreams and their failures. All of it preserved forever in the Great Archive. The Velthrani did not conquer. They did not destroy. They collected. They believed that knowledge was the only thing worth keeping, and so they traveled the galaxy, finding new species and downloading everything they were into, the eternal memory of the collective. Keshen had done this work for 400 years. Nothing surprised him anymore. The design matches a species called humans, he said. Origin, planet Earth. Carbon-based life forms. Average intelligence. Moderate technological development. They began space travel approximately 500 years ago. I do not remember them, Velen said. We have not cataloged them yet. They are new, young. Their civilization is small and far from our territory. Keshen tilted his head. This vessel appears to be what they call a generation ship. A slow vessel designed to carry colonists across great distances. The journey takes many lifetimes. Parents die. Children are born. Grandchildren arrive at the destination. Velen made a sound of confusion. That seems inefficient. They had no choice. Their early technology could not achieve faster travel. Keshen turned away from the window. Prepare a boarding team. We will add them to the archive. The shuttle crossed the distance between the two ships in silence. Keshen sat in the front seat with 6 junior archivists behind him. They were young and eager. For them, this was an adventure. For Keshen, it was simply another task. Another species to file away. Another memory to store. The human ship was called the Perseverance. Keshen could read the name painted on the hull and the strange symbols of their language. His translator implant converted the word instantly. Perseverance. It meant the act of continuing despite difficulty. The act of refusing to stop. An odd name for a ship, he thought. But humans were odd creatures. Their file in the preliminary database described them as emotional, irrational, and prone to conflict. They fought wars over ideas. They created art for no practical purpose. They formed attachments to other beings that served no biological function. Primitives, Keshen thought. Interesting primitives. But primitives nonetheless. The boarding team cut through the outer airlock with ease. The metal was old and weak. Inside, the air was stale, but breathable. Emergency power still flickered through the corridors. Red lights blinked in the darkness like tired eyes. Scan for life forms, Keshen ordered. A junior archivist named Yellen raised her device. She was young, barely 100 years old. Her scales were still bright blue, not yet faded to the gray of age. She moved the scanner slowly through the air. No life forms detected, she reported. But the central computer is active. It has been running on backup power for approximately 73 years. 73 years. The crew had been dead for 73 years. The ship had been drifting alone through the void for 73 years, and still the computer kept running. Still it held on to its memories. Keshen felt something strange, a small sensation in his chest that he did not recognize. He pushed it aside. Find the central database, he said. Download everything. They moved through the ship like ghosts. The corridors were narrow and cramped. Human bodies were small, Keshen noted, fragile. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore without much force. And yet, they had built this ship. They had launched themselves into the infinite darkness with nothing but hope and determination. Foolish, Keshin thought, but also brave. They found bodies along the way. Human remains, preserved by the cold vacuum that had leaked into certain sections. Men and women and children. Families who had died together. Keshin ordered his team to document everything but touch nothing. The dead deserved respect, even primitive dead. The central computer room was at the heart of the ship. It was a small chamber filled with machines that hummed with quiet energy. Screens glowed with text that Keshin could not read. His translator worked quickly, converting the human language into something he could understand. Emergency. Log day 4447. The sickness has taken the last of us. I am alone now. My name is Alina Chen. I am the final crew member of the Perseverance. If you are reading this, we failed. We never reached our destination. But we tried. God, how we tried. Keshin stared at the words for a long moment. Begin the download, he said quietly. Yellen connected their equipment to the human computer. Data began flowing from one system to the other. Thousands of files. Millions of documents. Images and videos and audio recordings. The entire history of a small community of humans who had lived and died in this metal shell. Archivist Prime, Yellen said. Her voice sounded strange. The file structure is unusual. Explain. Human data organization does not follow logical patterns. Their files are not sorted by category or date or importance. She paused, her three eyes blinking rapidly. They appear to be sorted by emotional significance. Keshin moved to look at her screen. She was right. The human files were chaos. A child's drawing was stored next to a complex engineering schematic. A love letter sat beside a death certificate. A song about heartbreak was filed with medical records describing a plague. Our system makes no sense, another archivist complained. It makes sense to them, Yellen said softly. She was staring at the screen with an expression Cassian had never seen before. They organized their memories the way they experienced them. Not by logic, by feeling. Keshin felt that strange sensation in his chest again. He ignored it. Complete the download, he ordered. We will sort it properly once it is in the archive. The transfer took several hours. The human database was larger than expected. These people had documented everything. Every birth and death. Every wedding and funeral. Every argument and reconciliation. Every moment of joy and sorrow and boredom and fear. They had painted pictures on the walls of their ship. They had written poems about stars they would never reach. They had recorded themselves singing songs and telling jokes and crying over losses. Why? Keshin wondered. Why document so much? Why create so much? They were dying. They knew they were dying. And still they made art. Still they told stories. Still they loved each other. He did not understand. The download completed as the ship's lights finally died. The last of the backup power faded away. The Perseverance went dark and silent. Its long journey was finally over, back on the Velthrani vessel. Keshin authorized the integration of human data into the Great Archive. It was a routine procedure. The files would be cataloged and stored like all the others. In a few cycles, no one would remember this unremarkable species from an unremarkable planet. But as he walked to his quarters that night, Keshin found himself thinking about Alina Chen, the last human, the woman who had died alone in the dark, surrounded by the memories of everyone she had ever loved. He did not know why he could not stop thinking about her. He did not know that deep within the archive, something was already changing. The human files were not sitting quietly like the others. They were connecting, spreading, reaching out to touch everything around them. And somewhere in the vast network of Velthrani knowledge, an archivist who had never even heard of humans suddenly stopped her work. She tilted her head, and for the first time in her life, she began to hum. They scanned the human vessel. They downloaded the file, and none were ever the same. Part 2. The first fracture 3 cycles passed after the download. 3 cycles of silence. 3 cycles of normal work and normal routines, and then everything changed. It started with archivist Yellen. She was sitting alone in her quarters, processing the music files from the human vessel. It was simple work. Listen to the audio, catalog its contents, store it in the proper section of the archive. She had done this task 1,000 times before, with 1,000 different species, but human music was different. The sounds entered her mind and refused to leave. They wrapped around her thoughts like vines around a tree. A woman singing about lost love. A man playing an instrument made of wood and strings. Children laughing as they clapped their hands in rhythm. Yellen did not understand why these sounds affected her. The Velthrani had no music. They had never needed it. Sound was for communication. Sound was forewarning. Sound was not for pleasure, and yet she found herself making a noise. A soft noise. A rising and falling tone that came from somewhere deep in her throat. She did not know what she was doing. She did not know why she was doing it, but she could not stop. She was humming. The word did not exist in the Velthrani language. She had learned it from the human files. Humming. The act of making music with a closed mouth. The act of turning sound into feeling. Yellen hummed for 3 hours. When she finally stopped, she felt something she had never felt before. Peace, comfort, joy. She was terrified across the archive station. Similar things were happening. Reports began arriving from every department. Strange behavior, unusual questions, impossible emotions. An archivist named Torvik had been processing human literature. He was old and experienced, nearly 600 years of service. He had cataloged the writings of hundreds of species. None had ever bothered him. But the humans wrote differently. They wrote about things that did not exist. Imaginary people in imaginary places doing imaginary things. They called these writings stories. And Torvik could not stop reading them. One story in particular consumed him. It was about a human man who lost his wife to illness. The man was sad. He was broken. He spent years alone, unable to move forward. And then, slowly, he learned to live again. He found new love. He found new purpose. He found hope. Torvik finished the story and sat in silence for a long time. Then he went to find another archivist. He wanted to talk about what he had read. He wanted to know if she had felt what he felt. He wanted to share. This had never happened before. Velthrani did not share experiences. They stored them. They filed them. They did not discuss them like they mattered. But suddenly, they mattered. In another section of the station, a group of archivists were arguing. Arguing, the word felt strange even to think. The Velthrani did not argue. They reached consensus through logical analysis. If 2 Velthrani disagreed, they simply examined the data until the correct answer became clear. But these archivists were not examining data. They were fighting about ideas. The topic was human history. One archivist had processed records of human wars. Millions dead. Cities destroyed. Families torn apart. He was horrified. He called humans monsters. He said they were the most violent species the archive had ever recorded. Another archivist disagreed. She had processed different records. Humans building hospitals. Humans feeding the hungry. Humans risking their lives to save strangers. She said humans were capable of great kindness. She said their violence did not define them. They shouted at each other. They waved their arms. They said things they could not take back. When it was over, neither had changed their mind. Neither had reached consensus. They simply walked away, still believing different things. This was impossible. This was wrong. This was exactly what humans did. Archivist Prime Keshen was summoned before the High Collective. The 7 leaders of Velthrani civilization sat in their ancient chamber, their gray scales gleaming under soft light. They had ruled for thousands of years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had never seen anything like this. "Explain," said the first voice. "What have you brought into our archive?" Keshen stood before them with his head bowed. He did not have an explanation. The human data was supposed to be ordinary. Simple files from a simple species. Nothing that could threaten a civilization as old and stable as theirs. The download was standard procedure, he said. I followed every protocol. Then why are our archivists singing? The second voice demanded. Why are they crying? Why are they asking questions about the meaning of existence? Keshin had no answer. A senior data analyst named Morrow stepped forward. She had been studying the problem since the first reports arrived. Her findings were disturbing. Human data does not behave like other species, she explained. When we archive a civilization, their information sits in storage. It waits to be accessed. It does not spread. She paused. Her three eyes blinked rapidly. Human data spreads. The High Collective stirred with confusion. I do not understand, said the third voice. Morrow continued. Human files are connected to each other in complex ways. A poem about death links to a song about grief. The song links to a story about loss. The story links to a painting of a funeral. Everything connects to everything else. She took a deep breath. When an archivist accesses one human file, they are exposed to dozens of others. And those files do not simply transfer information. They transfer feeling. An archivist who reads about human sorrow does not just learn what sorrow is. They experience it themselves. Silence filled the chamber. Delete it, said the fourth voice. Delete all human data immediately. Tried, Morrow admitted. It has already spread too far. The human files have connected themselves to millions of other records in the archive. Removing them would damage centuries of collected knowledge. The fifth voice spoke slowly. Are you saying the humans have infected us? I am saying they have changed us, and I do not know if we can change back. Keshin returned to his quarters that night, feeling something he could not name. The meeting had ended without resolution. The High Collective had ordered a quarantine of all human files, but everyone knew it was too late. The damage was done. He sat by his window and looked out at the stars. He had looked at stars his entire life. 400 years of watching the same lights in the same darkness. He had never thought anything of it, but tonight was different. Tonight, he found himself wondering about those lights. Not calculating their distance, or their temperature, or their chemical composition. Simply wondering, what was it like out there? What mysteries waited in the spaces between? What beauty had he missed because he was too busy cataloging it? He thought about Elena Chen, the last human on the Perseverance. The woman who had died alone with nothing but memories. He had watched her final recording 17 times now. Each time, it affected him more deeply. Her face, her voice, her eyes that held so much sadness and so much hope at the same time. She had known she was dying. She had known no one would ever find her. And still, she had recorded her message. Still, she had reached out across the void, hoping that someone, someday, would hear her. Why? Why do that? Why hope when hope was pointless? Keshian did not understand humans. He was beginning to think he never would. And then, sitting alone in the darkness, looking at stars he had seen a million times before, Archivist Prime Keshin did something he had never done in 4 centuries of existence. A drop of liquid fell from his eye, then another, then another. He raised a trembling hand to his face and touched the wetness there. He did not know what this was. The Velthrani had no word for it, but the humans did. They called it crying. They called it being alive, and Keshin, for the first time in his long life, finally understood what that meant. They scanned the human vessel. They downloaded the file. And none were ever the same. Part 3. The Schism 6 cycles had passed since the download. 6 cycles since the world began to break apart. And now the Velthrani Collective, united for 12,000 years, was tearing itself into pieces. Keshin stood at his window and watched the chaos unfold below. Archivists marched through the corridors in angry groups. Some carried signs with words painted in bright colors. Others shouted at each other across the halls. Security officers struggled to keep order. This was not how things were supposed to be. The Velthrani did not march. They did not shout. They did not fight among themselves. They were a species of calm logic and quiet purpose. But the humans had changed. Everything. 3 factions had emerged from the chaos. 3 groups with 3 different visions of what the Velthrani should become. The first group called themselves the Purists. They believed that human data was a disease, a corruption that needed to be burned out of their civilization. They wanted to delete every human file, even if it damaged the archive. They wanted to reset every archivist who had been contaminated, erasing their memories and personalities. They wanted to return to the way things were before. Their leader was an ancient archivist named Voroth. He was over 1,000 years old, one of the oldest Velthrani still alive. He remembered a time before expansion, before contact with other species. He remembered when the Velthrani were alone in the universe, peaceful and pure. The humans are poison, Voroth declared in his speeches. They have infected our minds with their chaos, their emotions, their irrational attachments. We must cut out the infection before it kills us all. And he followed him, especially the older archivists, especially those who feared change. The second group called themselves the Seekers. They believed that human data was not a disease, but a gift. They wanted more. They spent their time studying human philosophy and art and music. They asked questions that had never been asked before. What is the purpose of existence? Why are we here? What happens when we die? The Seekers had no single leader. They organized themselves in small groups, meeting in secret to share what they had learned. They traded human files like precious treasures. They tried to create their own art, their own music, their own stories. The humans have shown us what we were missing, a young seeker named Veth told her companions. For 12,000 years, we collected the memories of others. We never made our own memories. We never truly lived. Now we can. The Purists called the Seekers traitors. The Seekers called the Purists cowards. And between them stood the third group. Keshin led the observers. They did not want to destroy human data. They did not want to worship it either. They wanted to understand it. They wanted to know why humans were different. What made their files spread when others did not? What made their emotions so contagious? We cannot make good decisions without good information, Keshin told his followers. We must study the humans. We must learn what they were. Only then can we decide what we should become. The observers were the smallest faction. Most Velthrani wanted simple answers. The Purists offered fear. The Seekers offered hope. The observers only offered questions. But Keshin believed that questions were the most important thing of all. He gathered a small team and returned to the Perseverance. The human ship still drifted in the void where they had left it, dark and silent and full of secrets. "What are we looking for?" asked Yellen. She had joined the observers after her experience with human music. She still hummed sometimes when she thought no one was listening, answers Keshin said. The original download only captured the main database. There may be other files, hidden records, personal journals, things the humans did not want to share. The team boarded the dead ship once again. They moved through the dark corridors with lights attached to their heads. The bodies were still there. The paintings on the walls, the signs of a civilization that had lived and loved and died in this metal shell. Keshin led them deeper than before. Past the central computer room, past the crew quarters, into the private spaces where humans had kept their most personal secrets. They found Alina Chen's quarters near the back of the ship. It was a small room, a narrow bed, a desk covered in papers, pictures attached to the walls with tape. Keshin studied the pictures. They showed Alina at different ages, as a child with her parents, as a young woman with friends, as an older woman holding a baby that must have been her grandchild. A lifetime of moments captured in faded images. On her desk, they found her personal journal. It was not digital. It was made of paper, with words written by hand. Keshin's translator struggled with the messy handwriting. But slowly the words became clear. Alina had written in this journal for 50 years. She had recorded her thoughts and fears and hopes. She had written about the friends she made and the friends she lost. She had written about falling in love with a man named David, about marrying him, about watching him die when the plague came. She had written, about being the last one left. Keshin read her final entry aloud to his team. Day 4447. Everyone is gone. Now, David, Maria, little Thomas. All of them. I am alone in a ship full of ghosts. I should be sad. I am sad. But I am also grateful. Grateful for every moment I had with them. Grateful for every laugh and every tear and every stupid argument about nothing. They say life is about the destination. They are wrong. Life is about the journey. And my journey, strange as it was, has been beautiful. If anyone ever finds this, please know that we were happy here. We were scared and lost and dying, but we were happy because we had each other. And in the end, that is all that matters. Silence filled the small room. Yelena spoke first. She knew she was dying. She knew no one would save her. And she was grateful. She was grateful for what she had, Keshin said quietly. Not angry about what she lost. I do not understand humans, another archivist said. They make no sense, Keshin replied. They make perfect sense. We are the ones who have been living wrong. They searched the rest of the ship and found something unexpected. Hidden in a locked compartment near the engine room, there was a navigation computer. It contained coordinates. A destination. The Perseverance was heading somewhere, Yelena said, examining the data. A planet called Kepler 44 to be. The humans believed it could support life. Keshin felt his heart beat faster. Did they arrive? No. The ship lost power decades before reaching the destination. They never made it. Yelena paused. Her eyes widened. But the coordinates show that the planet is real, and there are signs of communication signals coming from that region of space. Other humans, Keshin whispered. There might be other humans. The thought filled him with an emotion he was only beginning to understand. Hope. A strange and powerful feeling. The belief that good things were possible, even when evidence suggested otherwise. The humans had given him this feeling. Alina Chen had given him this feeling. A dead woman reaching across time and space to teach him how to hope. Keshin made his decision in that moment. He would not stay and fight in a civil war between purists and seekers. He would not waste his time arguing about what humans had done to his people. He would find more humans. He would learn from them directly, and maybe, just maybe, he would discover why their memories had such power. Why their emotions spread like fire? Why a single ship full of ghosts had awakened an entire civilization. We are going to that planet, he announced to his team. We are going to find the humans. Yelena looked at him with surprise. The High Collective will never approve such a mission. I know, Keshin said. He looked around at Alina Chun's small room. At her pictures and her journal and her life captured in simple objects. That is why we are not going to ask permission. For the first time in his long life, Archivist Prime Keshin smiled. It was a human expression. It felt right. They scanned the human vessel. They downloaded the file. And none were ever the same part for. The awakening, the screaming started at midnight. Keshin was in his quarters when he heard it. A terrible sound. A sound of pain and fear and loss. He ran into the corridor and found chaos waiting for him. The purists had begun their cleansing. Armed security. Officers moved through the station in groups of 5. They carried devices that Keshin recognized with horror. Reset machines. Tools designed to erase memories and restore archivists to their original state. The Velthrani had used them before, but only on criminals. Only on those who had committed terrible crimes. Now they were using them on anyone who showed signs of human contamination. Keshin watched as they dragged a young archivist from her room. She was crying and begging them to stop. She had done nothing wrong. She had only listened to human music. She had only learned to feel. Please, she sobbed. Please do not take my memories. They are all I have. The officers did not listen. They pressed the device against her head. There was a flash of light, and then the young archivist stopped struggling. Her eyes went blank. Her face became empty. She stood up slowly, looked around with confusion, and walked away without another word. She was gone. Everything she had learned, everything she had felt, everything she had become, erased in a single moment. Keshin felt rage burn inside him. Another human emotion. Another gift from Alina Chen and her people. He gathered his observers and fled into the lower levels of the station. The purists controlled the main corridors now. The High Collective had given them authority to cleanse the contaminated. Anyone who resisted would be reset by force. "We cannot stay here," Yellen said. Her voice was shaking. "They will find us. They will erase us." "I know," Keshin replied. "That is why we are leaving." He told them about the coordinates. The planet called Kepler 44b. The communication signals that suggested humans might still exist somewhere in the galaxy. His team listened with wide eyes and rapid heartbeats. "You want to find them?" asked an old archivist named Torvik. He had been processing human literature when the changes began. He could not stop reading their stories. He could not stop caring about imaginary people and imaginary worlds. "You want to make contact with living humans?" "Yes. But why?" Torvik asked. "Their data nearly destroyed us. Their memories have torn our civilization apart. What could living humans do that would be any better?" Keshin thought about this question for a long moment. He thought about Alina Chen dying alone in her ship. He thought about her journal and her photographs and her final message of hope. He thought about the way her words had changed him, the way they had woken something inside him that had been sleeping for 400 years. "The human files taught us how to feel," he said slowly. "But feelings without understanding are dangerous. That is why our people are fighting. They feel things they do not understand. Fear, anger, confusion. They do not know what to do with these emotions." He looked at each member of his team. "Living humans could teach us. They have spent thousands of years learning how to live with their feelings, how to use them, how to control them, how to turn them into something beautiful instead of something destructive." Yellen nodded slowly. "We need teachers, not just files," as Keshin said. "Exactly." Words spread quickly through the underground networks. The Seekers heard about Keshin's plan and began sending representatives to meet with him. They came in small groups, sneaking through maintenance tunnels and forgotten passages. They came with hope in their eyes and fear in their hearts. One of them was Veeth. She was young, barely 90 years old. Her scales were bright green, the color of new growth. She had been one of the first to process human music, and she had taken it further than anyone else. She had not just listened to human songs, she had tried to create her own. "I want to come with you," she told Keshin. "I want to meet the creatures who taught me how to sing." "It will be dangerous," Keshin warned her. "We do not know what we will find. The humans might be dead. They might be hostile. They might be nothing like we imagine." Eth smiled. It was still a strange expression on a Velthrani face, but it was becoming more common every day. "I do not care about danger," she said. "I care about truth. I care about beauty. I care about becoming something more than a machine that stores other people's memories." Keshin understood. He felt the same way. The secret meetings continued for several days. More Velthrani joined their cause. Not all of them were seekers. Some were observers who wanted answers. Some were ordinary archivists who simply could not bear to lose what they had gained. They had tasted emotion. They had experienced wonder. They would rather die than go back to being empty. But there were also doubts. "What if the humans reject us?" asked a nervous archivist named Pellin. "What if they see us as thieves who stole their ancestors' memories?" "Then we will apologize," Keshin said, "and we will ask for forgiveness. That is another thing the humans taught us. How to admit when we are wrong. What if they want revenge? What if they attack us? Then we will defend ourselves. But we will not strike first. We will not become the monsters that the purists fear." Questions continued for hours. Some Velthrani decided they were too afraid and left. Others decided they were too curious and stayed. In the end, Keshin counted nearly 3,000 who were willing to make the journey. 3,000 awakened souls. 3,000 Velthrani who had learned to feel and refused to forget. On the night before their departure, Beth asked to speak to the group. They gathered in a large storage chamber deep beneath the station. Thousands of faces looked up at the young archivist with the bright green scales. "I want to play something for you," she said quietly. "Something I made myself." She had built an instrument from spare parts. It was crude and simple, nothing like the beautiful devices the humans had created. But when she touched it, music came out. Real music. Original music. The first song ever composed by a Velthrani in 12,000 years of civilization. The melody was simple. Slow notes rising and falling like waves on a shore. There were no words. There did not need to be. The music spoke directly to something deep inside each listener. Something that had been locked away until the humans set it free. Some of the Velthrani closed their eyes. Others began to sway gently. A few started to cry. They did not know why they were crying. They only knew that the sound was beautiful, and beauty was worth crying over. When the song ended, silence filled the chamber. Then someone began to clap. Then another. Then another. Soon, 3,000 Velthrani were applauding, making a sound like thunder, celebrating something they had never celebrated before. Creation, art, life. Keshin stepped forward and raised his hand. The applause faded into silence. "Tonight we leave everything we know behind," he said. "Our station. Our archive. Our old way of life. We go into the unknown, searching for a species that may or may not still exist. Many will call us fools. Many will call us traitors. But I say we are pioneers. We are the first Velthrani, brave enough to truly live." He pulled out a small device. On its screen was Alina Chen's face. Her final recording. Her message to anyone who might find her. "Before we go, I want everyone to hear this. I want you to know why we are doing this. I want you to understand what we are searching for." He pressed play. Elena's voice filled the chamber. Old and tired, but still full of warmth. Still full of love. If you are watching this, I hope you are kind. I hope you are curious. I hope, wherever you are from, you know what it is to love something so much it hurts. That is what we were. That is what we will always be. The recording ended. 3,000 Velthrani stood in silence, tears streaming down their faces. "That is what we are searching for," Keshin said softly. "Not just humans, but humanity. The ability to love so much that it hurts. The courage to hope when hope seems foolish. The strength to create beauty even when darkness surrounds us." He looked at his people, his family, his fellow awakened souls. "The humans gave us a gift. Now it is time to thank them." The ship launched an hour later. It carried 3,000 passengers and all their dreams. It carried music and stories and paintings made by Velthrani hands. It carried hope. Behind them, the station grew small and disappeared into the darkness. Ahead of them, the stars waited, and somewhere among those stars, the humans waited too. They scanned the human vessel, they downloaded the file. And none were ever the same. Part 5. First contact. 2 years. Passed in the darkness between stars. 2 years of travel through empty space. 2 years of waiting and hoping and wondering what they would find at the end of their journey. 2 years that changed the 3,000 Velthrani aboard the ship in ways none of them expected. They did not simply travel. They transformed without the rigid structure of the archive, without the constant pressure to catalog and store and file. The awakened Velthrani began to explore what it meant to be alive. They formed friendships. They fell in love. They argued about silly things and made up afterward. They told jokes and laughed at them. Even when the jokes were not very good, they created Veth, taught music to anyone who wanted to learn. Soon the ship echoed with songs at all hours. Some were copies of human melodies. Others were original compositions. A few were so strange and beautiful that they made listeners weep without understanding why. Torvik started a library of original Velthrani stories. Archivists who had spent centuries recording the tales of other species now invented their own. They wrote about love and loss and adventure. They wrote about heroes who overcame impossible challenges. They wrote about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. Others painted murals on the walls of the ship. They used colors the Velthrani had never used before. bright reds and deep blues and shimmering golds, images of stars and planets and faces filled with emotion. The ship that had started as a cold metal shell became a gallery of wonder. Keshin watched all of this with quiet pride. He had hoped the journey would change his people. He had not expected them to change so much, but he also worried, what would they find at the end? Would the humans welcome them? Would they even exist? The communication signals they had detected were old. Years old. Anything could have happened since then. And if the humans were there, how would they react to 3,000 aliens who had stolen their ancestors' memories? Keshan did not know. He could only hope. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel on a cold morning in the second year. Keshan stood on the bridge with Yellen and Veth beside him. Through the viewing window, they saw something that took their breath away. A planet. Blue and green and wrapped in white clouds. Orbiting a yellow star that looked almost exactly like the one humans called Sol, and around the planet's ships. Dozens of ships. Human ships. "They are here," Yellen whispered. "They are really here." Keshan felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not try to stop them. The communication screen flickered to life. A human face appeared. A woman with dark skin and gray hair, and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She looked at the Velthrani with an expression of shock and curiosity. "Unknown vessel," she said. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Human Colonies. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Chen. The name hit Keshan like a physical blow. Chen. The same family name as Alina. The same name as Lena Same. The woman who had died alone on the Perseverance 300 years ago. "My name is Keshan," he said. His voice trembled slightly. "I am an archivist prime of the Velthrani Collective. We come in peace. We come seeking teachers." Admiral Chen frowned. "Teachers? What do you mean?" Keshan took a deep breath. He had practiced this speech 1,000 times during the journey. Now that the moment had arrived, all his careful words disappeared. He spoke from somewhere deeper than his mind. He spoke from his heart. "Oh, many years ago, we found a ship called the Perseverance. It was drifting in deep space. Everyone aboard was dead, but the computers still held their memories, their stories, their music, their art." He paused. The Admiral's expression had changed. Her eyes were wider now, her mouth slightly open. "We downloaded those files into our archive. We thought they would be like all the others. Simple data to be stored and forgotten. But they were not like the others. They changed us. They woke us up. They taught us things we had never known in 12,000 years of existence." "What things?" Admiral Chen asked softly. "How to feel," Keshan said. "How to love. How to create. How to hope even when hope seems foolish." He felt tears running down his face. "Your ancestors gave us the greatest gift any species has ever received. They taught us how to be alive. We have come to thank you, and to ask if you will teach us more." Silence filled the bridge. Admiral Chen stared at the screen without speaking. Behind her, other humans had gathered. They watched with expressions of wonder and confusion. Finally, Admiral Chen spoke. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Elena Chen was my ancestor. My great-great-grandmother. We always wondered what happened to the Perseverance. We thought they were lost forever." "They were lost," Keshan said. "But they were not forgotten. Their memories live on in our archive. Their stories changed our civilization. Elena's final message has been heard by millions of Velthrani. She has become a symbol of hope for our people." Admiral Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears streamed down her cheeks. "You came all this way," she said slowly, "because of files from a dead ship. We came all this way because those files taught us that life is worth living, that love is worth fighting for, that beauty exists even in the darkest places." Keshan smiled. It still felt strange on his face, but it also felt right. "We came because your ancestors showed us what we could become, and we want to." "Become it," Admiral Chen laughed. It was a strange sound, full of joy and sadness mixed together. A human sound. A beautiful sound. Well, she said, I suppose we had better meet in person then. The first meeting happened on a neutral station between the human fleet and the Velthrani ship. Keshin led a small group through the airlock. Admiral Chen waited on the other side with her own delegation. For a long moment, no one spoke. Two species stood facing each other across a gap of biology and culture and thousands of years of separate evolution. Two species who had never met but who were already connected by something deeper than words. Then Veth stepped forward. She was carrying her instrument, the crude device she had built from spare parts, the tool that had created the first Velthrani music. May I? She asked Admiral Chen. The Admiral nodded slowly. Veth began to play. The melody drifted through the air like a living thing, soft notes rising and falling. A song without words but full of meaning. A song about journeys and discoveries and the courage to reach across the void. When she finished, the humans were crying. All of them. Tears ran down their faces without shame. That was beautiful, Admiral Chen whispered. Did you learn that from our files? No, Veth said proudly. I made it myself. Something changed in that moment. The gap between the two species suddenly seemed smaller. They were different in so many ways. But they shared something fundamental. Something that mattered more than biology or technology or history. They both knew how to cry when. Something was beautiful. The years that followed brought many changes. The Velthrani learned from the humans. Not just facts and data, but ways of living, ways of feeling, ways of turning emotion into art and art into meaning. The humans learned from the Velthrani too. They gained access to the Great Archive, the collected memories of 4,000 civilizations. They discovered that they were not alone in the universe, that countless species had lived and loved and created before them, and in the center of the newest archive station, they built a memorial. A statue of a woman sitting alone, looking up at the stars with hope in her eyes. Alina Chen, the last survivor of the Perseverance. The woman who died in darkness, but whose light had traveled across the galaxy. The plaque beneath. The statue carried her final words. I hope. Wherever you are from, you know what it is to love something so much it hurts. That is what we were. That is what we will always be. Keshin visited the statue every cycle. He was old now, over 500 years. His scales had faded to pale gray. His movements were slow and careful, but his eyes still sparkled with wonder. His heart still beat with emotions he had not known for most of his life. He stood before the statue and remembered. The first time he saw the Perseverance drifting in the void. The first time he read Elena's journal. The first time, he cried, he remembered the journey. The fear and the hope and the music filling the ship as they traveled through darkness. Toward an uncertain future, he remembered the moment of first contact. Admiral Chen's tears. Vith's song. The gap between two species closing like a wound finally healing. He remembered it all. And for the first time, he understood what the archive was truly meant to be. Not a storage facility for dead memories, but a bridge. A connection between all living things. A reminder that no one was ever truly alone. Keshin smiled at the statue of Alina Chen. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. The statue did not answer. But somewhere across the vast distances of time and space, Keshin believed that Alina heard him, and he believed that she was smiling too. The end.